There are moments when the simplest elements carry the greatest power. Moments when what has always been in front of you reveals itself not as ordinary, but as sacred. In Jewish wisdom, the most profound spiritual forces are rarely hidden in complexity. They are hidden in familiarity. They are placed so close to daily life that most people never suspect their depth. If I were you, I would pay close attention to what you are about to hear. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is ancient. And what is ancient does not need urgency. It needs recognition. Before anything else, if these teachings resonate with you and you value wisdom preserved through Torah, Hebrew tradition, and spiritual insight passed quietly through generations, I invite you to subscribe to the Jewish Wisdom channel. This is not about numbers. It is about preserving and sharing truths that were never meant to be loud, only lasting. And before we go further, write this short sentence in the comments with calm intention. Not as a ritual, not as superstition, but as awareness. Blessing flows toward my life naturally. In Jewish understanding, words spoken with intention do not beg reality. They align with it. Salt appears in the Torah long before money is ever mentioned, long before prosperity is discussed, long before kings, wealth, or empires. And that alone should make us pause. Because in Scripture, whatever appears early carries foundational meaning. Salt is introduced not as seasoning, but as covenant. In the book of Leviticus, every offering is commanded to include salt. You shall not allow the salt of the covenant of your God to be missing. This is not poetic language. It is precise instruction. Salt represents permanence, stability, preservation, continuity. Where salt is present, decay slows. Corruption is restrained. What would otherwise spoil is held intact. This is why Jewish sages never viewed salt as a substance alone. They viewed it as a spiritual principle made physical. Money, in Jewish wisdom, is not evil, holy, or neutral. It is responsive. It responds to structure. It responds to stability. It responds to environments that preserve value rather than waste it. This is why prosperity is often lost faster than it is gained. It enters spaces that cannot hold it. Salt, symbolically, is the opposite of waste. In Hebrew, the idea of blessing is inseparable from continuity. Sudden gain without preservation is not blessing. It is testing. True prosperity remains. It stabilizes. It multiplies quietly. This is what salt represents in spiritual language. Yet most people only see salt as something added to food. They miss its deeper role as a marker of covenant consciousness. In ancient Israel, to share salt with someone was to establish trust. To break bread with salt was to declare loyalty. Even today, Jewish tradition understands salt as a reminder that life is sustained not by sweetness alone, but by balance. Sweetness attracts, salt sustains. This is why wisdom warns against chasing pleasure without structure. Sweetness without salt spoils. Wealth without wisdom dissolves. Now here is where attention becomes important. Jewish wisdom does not teach magic. It teaches alignment. When salt is used consciously, it does not force money to appear. It creates conditions where prosperity does not rot, leak, or vanish. The sages taught that lack is not always absence. Sometimes lack is loss. And loss is often the result of environments that do not preserve. In spiritual terms, salt represents the ability to hold what arrives. Many people receive opportunities but cannot keep them. Receive money but cannot retain it. Receive favor but cannot sustain it. This is not because they are unworthy. It is because the inner structure is not yet salted. Salt strengthens boundaries. It defines limits. It says, this space is protected from decay. In Jewish households, salt is present on the table not merely for taste, but for remembrance. The table is compared to an altar. Meals are not only consumption. They are continuity of life. Salt on the table reminds the household that provision flows through covenant, not chance. This teaching is uncomfortable for a modern mindset that wants instant results without internal order. But Jewish wisdom has never promised speed. It promises permanence. If you have ever felt that money comes and goes too easily, that effort produces temporary relief, but not lasting stability. This is not a failure of work ethic. It is a signal. Something is entering without being preserved. At this stage, nothing has been instructed yet. Nothing has been revealed as practice. Only awareness has been awakened. Because wisdom always prepares the mind before it guides the hands. The Torah never rushes revelation. It establishes meaning first. Because action without understanding becomes superstition. Understanding without action becomes philosophy. Jewish wisdom insists on both. Salt teaches us that the physical world mirrors spiritual law. Preservation in the material reflects stability in the unseen. Where inner order exists, outer provision follows. And this is why ancient teachers spoke quietly about salt. They knew that what preserves life does not need advertisement. It needs respect. For now, let this settle. Not as excitement, but as recognition. The simplest element in your home may carry one of the oldest keys to stability and prosperity ever revealed. And if something in you feels unexpectedly calm rather than excited, that is a good sign. Wisdom rarely arrives as adrenaline. It arrives as clarity. What comes next is not about doing more. It is about understanding what you already hold. In Jewish thought, the physical world is not separate from the spiritual world. It is its echo. What happens in the unseen always seeks expression in the seen. This is why the Torah never treats material elements as random. Water cleanses, fire transforms, oil consecrates, and salt preserves. Preservation is not a modern obsession. It is a sacred concern. The sages observed that the greatest threat to blessing is not opposition, but erosion. Blessing rarely disappears overnight. It fades, it thins, it leaks. And by the time a person notices, they believe the problem is external, when in truth the structure that once held abundance was slowly dissolving. Salt stands against erosion. In the ancient Hebrew mindset, salt represents resistance to chaos. It is what slows decay in a world where everything naturally moves toward disorder. This is why the Torah calls it the salt of the covenant. A covenant is not emotion, it is continuity. It is what remains when feelings fluctuate and circumstances shift. Money behaves the same way. Prosperity that depends on emotion, motivation, or excitement will never last. But prosperity rooted in structure, discipline, and spiritual coherence stabilizes. This is why Jewish communities historically emphasized habits over hype, systems over shortcuts, continuity over spectacle. Salt embodies that philosophy in physical form. There is a reason the sages taught that wealth flows toward those who respect boundaries. Salt creates boundaries. It marks limits. It defines what is kept and what is released. Without boundaries, everything spills. Many people pray for increase while living without structure. They desire overflow but resist discipline. They want gain but avoid containment. Jewish wisdom sees this clearly and responds gently. First learn to preserve, then you will be trusted with more. In mystical tradition, salt is associated with gevura, restraint, strength, and definition. Not harshness, but clarity. Chest, loving expansion, without gevura, becomes chaos. Expansion without structure leads to loss. This is why prosperity requires both generosity and restraint. Salt is restraint with purpose. This is why ancient teachers warned against environments that celebrate sweetness alone. Sweetness attracts, but it also feeds decay if left unbalanced. Salt does not attract attention. It does not shine. It works quietly, invisibly, faithfully. So does real prosperity. When money begins to flow steadily, it does not announce itself. It stabilizes life. It removes fear. It creates space. It supports others without draining the giver. That is salted wealth. At this point, you may begin to sense that this teaching is not about salt as an object, but salt as a consciousness, a way of relating to provision, a posture toward life. And yet, Jewish wisdom never separates consciousness from action. What is internal must eventually be externalized. What is understood must eventually be embodied. But embodiment, without readiness, turns wisdom into superstition. This is why the Torah always reveals meaning before practice. If you feel curiosity, rather than urgency, you are in the right posture. Urgency comes from fear. Curiosity comes from alignment. Fear wants instant results. Alignment prepares lasting flow. Now pause for a moment and notice something subtle. Salt does not create food. It enhances what already exists. In the same way, this ancient principle does not create money from nothing. It protects, strengthens, and stabilizes what is already entering your life. Many people do not need more income. They need less leakage. Jewish wisdom is honest about this. The sages say that heaven does not pour blessing into broken vessels, not as punishment, but as mercy. Because wasted blessing increases sorrow rather than joy. This is why awareness always precedes action. If you feel called, write this quiet affirmation in the comments, not as a demand, but as orientation. I am becoming a vessel that can hold blessing. Let it be simple. Let it be calm. Because what comes next is not about effort. It is about alignment becoming tangible. And when alignment becomes tangible, Even the most ordinary elements begin to reveal their ancient power. Under Jewish wisdom, application is never rushed. What has been revealed must be allowed to settle into the rhythm of daily life, because truth that is forced becomes superstition, and wisdom that is hurried becomes distortion. The Torah does not command instant transformation. It invites steady alignment. And alignment, once restored, reorganizes life quietly, but decisively. The ancient sages taught that the world responds not to desire alone, but to readiness. Readiness is the ability to receive without losing what is received. This is why salt, as a principle, is never associated with spectacle. It is associated with endurance. It does not announce itself. It stabilizes what already exists. To apply this teaching is not to perform something dramatic, but to adjust posture. Begin by noticing how you relate to what enters your life: income, opportunities, relationships, time, energy. Do they arrive only to disappear? Do they feel unstable, temporary, difficult to hold? Jewish wisdom does not interpret this as failure. It interprets it as information. Information reveals where preservation is needed. In Hebrew consciousness, the question is never how do I attract more, but can I sustain what I receive? This question alone shifts the entire relationship with prosperity. It removes desperation and replaces it with responsibility. And responsibility, in Jewish thought, is not burden, it is dignity. The application of this wisdom begins internally. Cultivate a mindset of stewardship rather than consumption. What enters your life is not merely to be used, but to be protected, honored, and directed. Salt represents this exact posture. It slows impulse. It creates pause. It asks for intention before action. This is why Jewish law emphasizes blessing before eating. Not after, before. Awareness precedes consumption. Gratitude precedes use. When gratitude comes first, waste diminishes. When waste diminishes, stability increases. Apply this principle to money. Before spending, pause. Not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect signals to the unseen realm that you value what you receive. Valued resources tend to remain. Disregarded resources tend to leave. The sages explained that money is sensitive to attitude. Not morally, but structurally. Money flows toward systems that manage it well. Even heaven honors good structure. Another application is order. Order is spiritual hospitality. Chaos repels blessing because it offers no place for it to rest. This does not mean perfection. It means intentional arrangement. A life where priorities are clear. A home where values are visible. A schedule where energy is not constantly drained by disorder. Salt, in the ancient world, was used to purify and protect spaces. Not magically, but symbolically. It marked boundaries. It declared that something mattered enough to preserve. Begin marking boundaries in your life. Boundaries around time, around spending, around emotional energy, around habits that drain without giving back. Jewish wisdom teaches that boundaries do not restrict life, they protect it. This is where many misunderstand prosperity. They believe freedom comes from lack of limits. Jewish wisdom teaches the opposite. Freedom comes from well-chosen limits. Salt is limitation that saves. At this point, write this sentence in the comments slowly and consciously. As an internal alignment made visible, I honor what enters my life, and it remains. Writing is important. In Jewish tradition, writing seals intention. The Torah itself is written, not spoken alone, because writing stabilizes memory. Memory sustains identity. Identity sustains blessing. As this application deepens, another shift occurs. Fear begins to loosen. Fear is the greatest enemy of preservation. Fear rushes. Fear grabs. Fear hoards. Fear causes waste in the name of protection. Salt calms fear by reminding the soul that stability comes from structure, not panic. This is why people who suddenly receive money without inner order often lose it. The problem is not the money. It is the absence of salt. Salt does not multiply food. It makes food last. Likewise, this teaching does not promise instant wealth. It promises continuity. And continuity, over time, always outpaces sudden gain. Jewish wisdom is patient because it thinks generationally. Wealth is not measured in moments, but in years. In stability, passed on. In peace that endures. In provision that does not collapse under pressure. Apply this by thinking beyond urgency. Ask not only what benefits you now, but what strengthens your future self. Choices made from this posture attract a different quality of opportunity. Opportunities that are stable, partnerships that endure, income that grows slowly but surely. Another practical application lies in speech. The sages warn that careless words dissolve structure. Complaints spoken repeatedly weaken confidence. Scarcity language trains the mind to expect loss. Replace urgency with steadiness in how you speak about money, work, and provision. This is not denial. It is orientation. Say less about lack. Say more about responsibility. Say less about fear. Say more about gratitude. Gratitude is not passive. It is active recognition that something is already being preserved. At this stage, salt has become more than substance. It has become symbol, posture, and practice. You are no longer trying to force prosperity. You are preparing a vessel that can hold it. This is why Jewish wisdom insists that abundance is attracted to calm households. Homes where panic does not rule, where order is respected, where identity is clear. Such environments feel safe to blessing. Let this application unfold gently. Do not rush to prove anything. The sages say that blessing tests the ground before it settles. When the ground is stable, it stays. And this is the quiet power of ancient wisdom. It does not dazzle. It stabilizes. It does not promise speed. It ensures continuity. When preservation becomes your posture, increase becomes natural. And when increase becomes natural, prosperity stops feeling like a miracle and starts feeling like order restored. There is a moment that comes quietly in every life when effort is no longer the problem. The hands have worked. The mind has planned. The hours have been given. And yet something remains unsettled. Not empty, but unstable. Not broken, but unheld. Jewish wisdom recognizes this moment with compassion. It is the moment when the soul realizes that striving alone cannot preserve what life brings. The sages never mocked this realization. They honored it. They understood that exhaustion is often the doorway to alignment. When force no longer works, clarity becomes possible. There is an old teaching, whispered rather than written, passed between teachers and students who learn to observe life closely. It speaks of a household where nothing dramatic ever happened, yet everything quietly changed. No sudden wealth, no public miracle, just a slow return of stability after years of uncertainty. The head of that household once said something simple. I stopped asking why things left, and started asking whether I had prepared a place for them to stay. That sentence carries the weight of generations. Jewish wisdom teaches that the world does not resist us randomly. It responds to us intelligently. When provision enters a life and finds anxiety, it feels unwelcome. When it finds disorder, it slips away. When it finds calm intention, it rests. Salt appears again here, not as an object, but as a metaphor for maturity. Maturity is the ability to receive without panic, to hold without gripping, to preserve without fear. Many people believe that emotion fuels success. Jewish wisdom teaches that steadiness sustains it. Emotion initiates movement. Steadiness allows continuity. Salt is steadiness made visible. There is deep compassion in this teaching. It does not accuse those who struggle. It explains them. It recognizes that most people were never taught how to hold blessing. They were taught how to chase it. Chasing trains urgency. Urgency dissolves structure. Structure is what salt restores. As this understanding settles, people often feel an unexpected emotion, relief. Not excitement, relief. The relief of realizing that they are not broken. They are simply unsalted. Their life was receiving without preserving. This realization changes the inner dialogue. Money stops feeling like an enemy. Opportunity stops feeling dangerous. Success stops feeling temporary. Fear loosens its grip because fear thrives on instability. Jewish wisdom sees fear as the opposite of salt. Fear accelerates decay. It rushes decisions. It wastes energy. It confuses urgency with importance. Salt slows life down just enough for wisdom to catch up. There is a reason ancient Jewish households valued rhythm. Regular meals, regular prayer, regular rest. Not because routine is sacred in itself, but because rhythm preserves sanity, and sanity preserves blessing. A life without rhythm leaks. A life with rhythm holds. If this message feels personal, allow it to. Wisdom becomes real when it names something you could never quite explain. There is no shame in recognizing instability. Recognition is the beginning of preservation. Take a moment now and respond from the heart in the comments. Not with analysis. Not with explanation. Just write what you feel you have been losing that you wish would stay. Peace, money, energy, confidence, direction. Writing it is not exposure, it is honesty, and honesty creates coherence. As this teaching moves deeper, something important must be said gently. Prosperity is not a reward for moral perfection. It is a response to alignment. Jewish wisdom separates worthiness from readiness. You have always been worthy. Readiness is what changes. Readiness is quiet. It does not announce itself. It feels like steadiness returning. Like decisions becoming less frantic. Like saying no without guilt. Like choosing order without obsession. Salt is readiness. When readiness appears, life responds differently. Opportunities become calmer. Income becomes steadier. Choices become clearer. None of this feels dramatic. It feels sane. And sanity, in Jewish thought, is deeply spiritual. This is why the Torah does not glorify extremes. It blesses balance. It honors those who walk steadily rather than those who sprint wildly and collapse. As this reflection nears its close, allow yourself to consider this without pressure. What if abundance has been waiting not for effort, but for calm? What if stability has been waiting not for more action, but for better containment? Faith, in Jewish wisdom, is not belief without evidence. It is trust in order. Trust that when life is aligned, provision behaves differently. If this teaching has stirred something real in you, something steady rather than sensational, know that this is how ancient wisdom works. It does not overwhelm, it reorganizes. And as you sit with this, remember one final truth that the sages guarded carefully. Blessing does not need to be chased. It needs to be able to stay. What unfolds now is not an ending, but a settling. In Jewish wisdom, truth is never closed abruptly. It is allowed to rest, the way the Sabbath rests upon the week, not as interruption, but as fulfillment. When wisdom reaches its final form, it does not demand movement. It invites stillness. And in stillness, integration happens. Everything that has been revealed was never about salt alone. Salt was the doorway. The teaching was always about preservation, coherence, and the quiet maturity required to hold what life brings without fear. Jewish wisdom has always understood that abundance is not impressed by intensity. It is drawn to stability. This is why so many people feel exhausted, not from lack of effort, but from lack of containment. They have worked, they have tried, they have prayed, yet something always feels temporary. Relief arrives and then leaves. Money comes and dissolves. Opportunities open and then close. The soul begins to believe that instability is normal. Ancient wisdom gently corrects this belief. Instability is not destiny. It is a signal. The sages taught that blessing behaves like a guest. It observes the environment before it settles. If it senses anxiety, it stays briefly. If it senses disorder, it passes through. But when it senses calm intention, clarity of values, and respect for continuity, it rests. This is why Jewish wisdom places so much emphasis on the home, on rhythm, on remembrance, on structure. These are not restrictions. They are invitations. They tell life, quietly but firmly, you are safe here. Prosperity responds to safety. Safety is created when a person stops living in reaction and begins living in alignment. Reaction is driven by fear. Alignment is guided by identity. Fear rushes. Identity steadies. When identity is clear, choices change naturally. Spending becomes thoughtful. Work becomes intentional. Giving becomes joyful rather than anxious. Receiving becomes calm rather than suspicious. None of this feels dramatic. It feels sane. And sanity, in Jewish thought, is deeply spiritual. As this teaching settles, many people experience an unexpected emotion. Not excitement, not urgency, but relief. Relief that they are not broken. Relief that nothing mystical was missing. Relief that what they needed was not more effort, but more coherence. This relief is not laziness. It is maturity. Maturity is the ability to hold blessing without gripping it, to receive without panic, to preserve without hoarding. Salt embodies this maturity. It protects without controlling. It preserves without dominating. This is why the Torah connects salt to covenant. A covenant is not excitement. It is commitment over time. It is what remains when emotion fluctuates. It is what holds when circumstances change. Prosperity rooted in covenant does not disappear when seasons shift. It adjusts, it adapts, it remains. If you feel that this message has slowed something inside you, that it has softened urgency rather than increased desire, that is not accidental. Ancient wisdom recalibrates pace. It restores rhythm, and rhythm is what allows life to breathe. At this point, you may notice that fear speaks less loudly. Fear thrives on instability. When structure appears, fear loses authority. And when fear loses authority, clarity returns. Clarity does not promise instant wealth. It promises something more valuable first. Stability. Stability creates trust. Trust attracts continuity. Continuity becomes abundance with time. This is the order Jewish wisdom has always honored. If you feel called, take a quiet moment and write this final declaration in the comments. Not to convince anyone, not to perform spirituality, but as a personal seal of intention and identity. I am a vessel that can hold blessing with calm and responsibility. Let the words be gentle. Let them be steady. Do not repeat them compulsively. Truth spoken once, with sincerity, carries more weight than urgency. Spoken many times, and remember this deeply. Real change does not feel chaotic, it feels grounded. It feels like returning to yourself after living slightly misaligned for too long. It feels like coherence. If this teaching has walked with you through clarity, reflection, and inner realignment, know that wisdom grows best through companionship. No one integrates ancient truth alone. Tradition survives because it is shared, explained, revisited, and lived over time. For those who feel ready to continue this journey with more depth, stories, and grounded understanding, there is a companion resource created for exactly this purpose. The Jewish Wisdom eBook on Abundant Prosperity explores these principles patiently, weaving Torah insight, rabbinic understanding, and practical reflection into a path that restores not only provision, but peace. You can access the ebook through the link in the description of this video or in the first pinned comment. There is no pressure. Wisdom respects timing. When the moment feels right, the door is already open. And now, let this message be sealed gently, without force, without urgency, without fear. Blessing does not avoid you. It does not test you through instability. It waits for coherence. When coherence returns, when preservation becomes your posture, when calm replaces urgency, abundance no longer passes through your life. It recognizes where it belongs.